In order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood, from my heart I take refuge in the three jewels. In order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood, from my heart I take refuge in the three jewels. In order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood, from my heart I take refuge in the three jewels. Whatever the virtues of the many fields of knowledge, all are steps on the path of omniscience. May these arise in the clear mirror of intellect. O Manjushri, please accomplish this. Good evening and welcome back. So we're getting into some real interesting waters with these writings here this evening. Okay. I suspect we're on page 192. Does anyone agree or disagree? Sounds good enough. You do?
292.
Thank you. 292. So much for these glasses. Okay. So maybe take a step back here a little bit. So we're going through, there's a series of 3 writings by Alan Wallace giving his presentation of the path of meditation. And this is towards the end of the first one. If, however, you would prefer to take mindfulness of breathing itself as your path to achieving shamatha within its Dzogchen context, we probably have to agree that Trungpa Rinpoche was operating from the Dzogchen context as well. Maybe a blend of Dzogchen and Mahamudra, but similar. Then, once you have simply settled your mind in its natural state in a preliminary way, then you may return to maintaining awareness of the rhythm of the respiration. Now, especially during the inhalations, begin to recognize the emptiness of the mind. There's only luminosity and cognizance. Then once this is well established, especially during the exhalations, begin to realize the emptiness of the body. There's only space with tactile sensations appearing in it, like rainbows in the sky. So interesting alternation of different content during the in and out breath. Inhalation is the mind. Nature of the mind is empty, luminous cognizance, and exhalation is the body. Consciousness is coextensive with space, such that the nature of consciousness is space, and the nature of space is consciousness. That's interesting. I thought consciousness didn't have any entity to it, any nature. This is the perceivable space of the substrate. Ah, okay. Not the physical space, which no one has ever seen directly. There you go. Okay, so the substrate, alaya, the appearances arising in that space, the alaya, are illuminated and known by themselves. So the inner space of the mind and the outer space of the body are actually non-dual, since those experiences of body happen within the inner space of the mind. But I like that phrase, the outer space of the body. Thus the actual nature of the mind and the actual nature of the body are indivisible and mutually pervasive. What is he talking about? if once you're at ease with understanding the non-duality of both types of emptiness, I guess we're used to things like this where they don't totally make sense, right? But it like, we'll see how it plays out, right? Once you're at ease with understanding the non-duality of both types of emptiness, mind and body may oscillate between emphasizing the emptiness of the mind and the inhalations and emptiness of the body on the exhalations within each cycle of respiration. But the oscillation does not necessarily need to be correlated with every cycle of breath. Rather, establish a rhythm that naturally counteracts both laxity and excitation by alternately intensifying and relaxing the awareness, without that awareness ever losing its object of mindfulness, the rhythm of the respiration. So the mind is, the awareness is on the rhythm of the respiration, but we're actually paying more attention at the same time to an oscillating rhythm of internal and external emptiness. External meaning the body. Once the respiration is actually settled in its natural rhythm, the durations of the inhalation exhalation will be quite brief. So by that time, it would not be advisable to alternate between meditating on the emptiness of the mind and the emptiness of the body in every cycle of the respiration. In other places, he said that when the respiration calms down to a natural flow, each one takes 4 seconds. So yes, he doesn't consider that to be long enough to genuinely connect with the emptiness of the mind and the emptiness of the body. Rather, one will have become so familiar with each that the experience of the emptiness of both the body and mind seamlessly merges. One gradually releases the oscillation. Okay, so the oscillation then ceases, and there's just a continuity of emptiness of mind and body. I guess in this Dzogchen approach to mindfulness of breathing, you effectively settle your mind in its natural state by taking as your path an approximation of the final 2 of the 4 modes of mindfulness. Mindfulness devoid of mindfulness. So this is not the 4 foundations of mindfulness, but this is the 4 mindfulnesses in the Mahamudra / Dzogchen system. Rob.
So to be clear, this particular approach to shamatha is to be attempted after one has done extensive off the cushion contemplation on emptiness of body and emptiness of mind, so that you
Yeah,
have something actually to feed into this meditation, right?
that's a good point. Does he actually say that? Did he say that last week? But that's a good point. I mean, otherwise we're just perpetuating a mind
Making stuff
created.
up.
Yeah, making shit up. Yeah, one would have to have gone through ideally a rigorous Madhyamaka analysis and contemplation to the point of a significant conclusion.
Yeah,
And then
some sort
bring
of
that,
conceptual, as certain as you can be conceptually.
yeah, well, still conceptual, yeah. Thank you for that. In this Dzogchen approach to mindfulness of breathing, you effectively settle your mind in its natural state by taking as your path an approximation of the final 2 of the 4 modes of mindfulness: mindfulness devoid of mindfulness, which corresponds to the substrate, the aliya, and the 4th, self-illuminating mindfulness, corresponding to the substrate, consciousness. The actual stage of mindfulness devoid of mindfulness occurs once your physical senses have withdrawn into the actual state of mindfulness devoid of mindfulness, the 3rd one, when your physical senses have withdrawn into mental awareness, and with a subtle non-conceptual mode of cognition, You are aware only of the substrate, the space of awareness, without bearing anything else in mind. This is the culmination of releasing your mind into space. The fourth and final phase of mindfulness in the Dzogchen practice of taking the mind as the path occurs when you then invert your awareness in upon itself and directly unveil the innate luminosity of your own substrate consciousness. This is the culmination of focusing your attention on the luminosity and cognizance of awareness itself. Interesting progression. And it reminds me that in last week's class, there was a couple of sentences a few pages back that seemed to be repetitive. And Cynthia contacted me subsequently during the week and helped me realize that they're slightly different. So if we go, so we're on 293, but if we go back to 289, the middle of the first full paragraph, actually the whole full paragraph, first paragraph, through the practice of shamatha, we penetrate the highly configured, non-physical human mind, which arises in dependence upon and in correlation with the functioning of a physical human brain. 2. So we penetrate through that to the subtly configured, non-physical substrate consciousness, from which this human mind emerges during the process of gestation. So, a couple of interesting things he's saying there. One is that we penetrate through the highly configured, non-physical human mind, which arises in dependence upon the physical brain, to the subtly configured, non-physical substrate. From which this human mind emerges during the process of gestation. So as we develop in the womb, the functioning of a physical human brain and the mind which functions in dependence upon it arise later on. Through the practice of Vipassana then, so having settled into the substrate through the practice of Vipassana, we penetrate through the substrate to the absolute space of phenomena, the ultimate dharmadhatu, or emptiness. So we break through and connect genuinely with emptiness in a non-conceptual, direct cognitive experience. Then through the Dzogchen practice of cutting through to the original purity of pristine awareness, which is the first of the two Dzogchen practices, we penetrate through the substrate consciousness once again. The first one was through the alaya, the substrate. We penetrate through the substrate, which is like an object. So we experience the emptiness of phenomena, because the substrate is all phenomena. And below that is dharmadhatu, the realm of true phenomena, the way things really are. Remember, we looked at this text distinguishing phenomena from their appearance, from their distinguishing phenomena through their true nature. So dharma versus dharmata. So then through the Dzogchen practice of cutting through to the original purity of pristine awareness, we penetrate through the substrate consciousness. So first was the objective sphere, and now the subjective sphere, to utterly unconfigured primordial consciousness, the Dharmakaya, the embodiment, the formless embodiment of primordial wisdom, which naturally and timelessly illuminates the whole of reality. Okay, so those two are different in that way. The first one is the objective sphere, and the second one is the subjective sphere. So back on page 293, the first full paragraph. Actually, we finished that paragraph, so the next paragraph here, when taking an approximation of these as the path at an earlier stage of practice. These meaning settling the mind in its natural state, taking the mind as path, taking consciousness as path. It seems to have these two options, taking the mind as the path and taking consciousness as the path. Here, when taking an approximation of these as a path at an earlier stage, so earlier on we're trying to take these as path, but it's not genuinely happening because we haven't reached accomplishment in them. So an approximation, you will continue to experience tactile sensations and so on while breathing. But this is because they are apprehended with your coarse mental consciousness, which functions simultaneously with and temporarily veils the non-conceptual knowing of the substrate consciousness. But through maintaining awareness of the ever-present vacuity of the substrate. And he uses vacuity instead of emptiness, so distinguishing those two. The sort of quality of not being able to identify anything about the substrate, as opposed to emptiness is a different animal. Let's see. Through maintaining awareness of the ever-present vacuity of the substrate, non-dual with the substrate consciousness. So the consciousness and its object are non-dual, same thing, so to speak, while still practicing mindfulness of breathing. Conceptualization is naturally calmed. Continue with this oscillating inversion and release of attention until you can maintain a continuous flow of mindfulness with no incursion of coarse excitation, that is, excitation in which your attention completely disengages from the object of meditation. So the sentence before, conceptualization is naturally calmed. Continue with this oscillating inversion and release of intention. At that point, you can then also release the concept of duration of the in and out breaths and simply maintain an ongoing flow of homogeneous mindfulness of the whole body of the respiration. So, is he giving presenting a stage that's after the stage in the last paragraph of the third and fourth mindfulness, or is he fleshing out these two mindfulnesses, starting with the first one here? I think that's what he's doing. It's not completely clear, though, is it? Let's see. You can collapse the concept of duration and simply maintain an ongoing flow of homogeneous mindfulness of the whole body of the respiration simultaneously. Maintain a peripheral awareness of the energetic fluctuations corresponding to the rhythm of the respiration throughout the body. A peripheral awareness of the energetic fluctuations corresponding. Is that like a very complicated way of saying pay light attention to the flow of energy in the body as the air moves in and out? By this time, you can release the oscillation altogether. Eventually, your attention would become so single-pointedly withdrawn from the five sensory domains and focused on the mental domain of substrate/substrate consciousness that thoughts and appearances of the five physical sense fields will subside. So sensory experience collapses. By progressing through the phases of shamatha with its four modes of mindfulness, beginning with the single-pointed mindfulness and then manifest mindfulness. So this is the Mahamudra Dzogchen scheme of the four mindfulnesses. The coarse mind eventually dissolves into the substrate consciousness, and all six fields of perceptual experience dissolve into the substrate. The objects of the six senses dissolve into the substrate. Which brings you to the third mindfulness, which is devoid of mindfulness in the sense of the coarse mental function that bears something in mind, presumably because it's become a non-dual situation. When you then withdraw your awareness from this empty space of the substrate and invert it upon itself, this results in the fourth mindfulness, self-illuminating mindfulness, awareness looking at awareness. So going from object in the third, object of perception in the third mindfulness, to subject of perception in the fourth. Here the mind authentically rests in its natural state. Shamatha is fully achieved, and you gain experiential access to the first jhana, or meditative stabilization, in the form realm. Abiding in this state of samadhi, you simultaneously experience a sense of well-being, luminosity, and non-conceptuality, the three main experiences of accomplishing or progressing in shamatha. Bliss, luminosity, and non-thought, we usually say. And your mind is imbued with the five dhyana factors of single-pointed attention, well-being, the faculty of coarse investigation, joy. So 2 and 4 are usually distinguished as being, the first one is physical well-being, and the second one, joy, is more of a mental experience. And fifth, the faculty of subtle analysis. So there's 2 levels of analysis, coarse investigation, 2 levels of sort of mentation, coarse investigation and subtle analysis in the first dhyana. These are the 5 dhyana factors of the first dhyana state. Which is a little odd because it sounds like there's still thought, but I think it's sort of in the type of sheshan thought of just like knowing what's going on.
Yeah, it seems like it requires a lot of subtle analysis just to do the practice.
Yeah, it's an oddity about the dhyana state where these 2 factors are key, feature big or large or important in the accomplishment of that first jhana state. And then they drop away, both of them, into the second jhana. And they go one at a time. Sometimes we hear a scheme of 5 dhyana states. The first one is segmented into 2, relating to letting go of the coarse investigation first, and then this dhyana state deepens, and then we let go of one lets go of the subtle analysis, and then achieves the second dhyana. Consequently, from this point onward, for as long as you remain in meditative equipoise, your mind is free of the 5 obscurations, meaning obscurations to dhyana, which are fixations on the allures of the desire realm, malevolence, laxity and dullness, excitation and anxiety, and afflictive uncertainty. Doubt, big doubt. The 5 jhana factors, respectively, have progressively served as antidotes to the 5 obscurations along the path to shamatha. And now, upon achieving shamatha, they come into their full power. While progressing through these 4 modes of mindfulness, the flow of non-conceptual knowing is to be sustained as much as possible between formal meditation sessions. That's interesting. Non-conceptual knowing in post-meditation. Presumably a sense of something that has been experienced in meditation practice, the way that we flash back to that experience during the day. Or we can sort of open or relax into it. So that the division between meditative equipoise and the post-meditative state begins to dissolve away. In general, the 5 obscurations are attenuated during periods of samadhi, but the key is to apply their antidotes in a steady flow, day and night, along the path to shamatha. What does attenuated mean?
To lessen?
Lessened, that makes sense, thank you. Through the practice of mindfulness of breathing, you sustain a flow of non-conceptual knowing throughout the entire course of each cycle of respiration, which leaves no space for the intrusion of concepts. Thus, this shamatha method prepares you in a special way for the non-conceptual knowing of the unconditioned emptiness of inherent existence of the mind and the conditioned luminosity of the wisdom realizing emptiness that must come in Vipassana. Upon entering the Dzogchen practice of cutting through, this shamatha method will in turn have prepared you for the non-conceptual knowing of the unborn luminosity of pristine awareness and its unconditioned emptiness of inherent existence. Which, given what he explained before, happens when we the shamatha method prepares you for the breakthrough by Vipassana into pristine awareness. Conduct, so we have view meditation. Conduct between formal meditation sessions during the waking and dreaming state. Waves of appearances constantly arise to our awareness, and habitually we appropriate them as I and mine, and then reify them, thus planting and replanting the roots of our own suffering. But when we closely apply mindfulness to the various appearances of the body, we see that they are simply appearances with no owner, arising in the space of awareness, and nowhere among or apart from them do we perceive an objectively existent, substantial, physical body. Parallel to the Buddhist, so the bodies disappear. They are simply appearances with no owner arising in the space of awareness, and nowhere among or apart them do we perceive a body, an identifiable thing called a body. This is parallel to the Buddhist statement that the mind is not the mind. The nature of the mind is clear light. So that's from the Prajnaparamita Sutras, the Asta Sahasrika in 8,000 lines. Prajnaparamita Sutras. It says the Sanskrit is something like this. Manas, manas means, so there's mind, manas. Manas is no mind. And then prabhasvara. Is it prabhasvara or some other word for luminosity? Mind is not the mind. The nature of the mind is clear light. So you could say there are three. Some translators say about that quote that it means there's three stages in understanding mind. There's mind in a relative sense in the way it's understood in the Abhidharma. Mind is empty is the second stage, and mind is luminous is the third. And they correlate to the three turnings of the wheel of the Dharma, which is interesting to have in the Prajnaparamita Sutra, particularly one of the earliest ones. Similar to that, since the mind is not the mind, it's empty in luminosity, it said that the body is not the body, the nature of the body, which the Buddha likened to a clot of foam, is space. The same is true of mental appearances, both when we're awake and while dreaming. None of them has an owner, nor do they inherently exist from their own side. So while engaging in various activities off the cushion, such as suggested or instructed by the phrase by the Tisha, between sessions act as an illusory being. You appear, you're a causal agent, and are influenced by appearances manifesting to your awareness, but you're not really here. Hence, you're an illusory being. As for all the appearances of your surrounding environment, again, while awake or while dreaming, note that all these appearances, while seeming to be really over there in objective space, are in reality empty appearances arising in the space of your awareness, the substrate. This is equally true during the daytime and while dreaming, with the primary difference being that daytime appearances may be intersubjectively experienced by multiple sentient beings. It's an interesting way of phrasing that very difficult to explain situation. While dream appearances are normally experienced by only one subject, the dreamer, as well as one's internal world. As much as you can, rest your awareness in the intervening space in front of you, for this will help curb the tendency to reify the physical objects appearing in that space. So he's not specific, but the implication is the space right in front of you, as opposed to objects which appear somewhere further from you. And follow Tisha's advice, view all phenomena as dreamlike. The reification of ourselves, other people, and our environment throughout the course of the day and night is sustained by an obsessive, compulsive flow of conceptualization. In order to undermine the delusion of viewing oneself and all other phenomena as inherently existent between meditation sessions, rest as continuously as possible in a flow of perceptual awareness without superimposing concepts or labels on it, external or internal appearances. As soon as the thought arises, simply note it without diverting your attention to its referent and thereby appropriating or thinking about it. In this way, thoughts arise and pass of their own accord without being conflated with or superimposed on perceptual appearances. So just notice thoughts arising and don't pay any attention to their content. As Lara Blinkpa counsels in his teachings on resting the mind in its natural state, there arises a non-conceptual sense that nothing can harm your mind, regardless of whether or not thoughts have ceased. In this way, the Tisha again advises, constantly resort solely to a sense of mental well-being. Nothing can harm your mind. That's the well-being of mind. Having a fearless attitude that mind is fundamentally positive and pure. So that was called A Lamp for Dispelling the Five Obscurations. So that seems to be like culminating in accomplishment of shamatha, resting in the substrate. 2, the crucial point of settling mental speech in its natural state of silence by settling the respiration in its natural rhythm. In his great treatise on the stages of the path to alignment, when beginning the Pith Instructions on achieving shamatha, J. Tsongkhapa, Lord Tsongkhapa, describes the 7-point physical posture of Vairochana, and as the 8th point, he writes, regarding your respiration, the movement of the in and out breath should not be audible, forceful, or agitated. By all means, its outward and inward movement should be imperceptible, ever so gentle and effortless. As we all know, that takes some time to accomplish. After further describing the benefits of an upright cross-legged posture, he adds in this way at the outset, practice maintaining your body in the 8 points of physical contact, just as I've explained. In particular, completely calm the prana of your breathing until it settles in its own place. Later in the text, when describing the achievement of pliancy, Jade Tsongkhapa cites Ratnakara Shanti's Pith Instructions on Transcendent Wisdom. Bodhisattvas, dwelling alone in solitude, direct their attention to their intended object, having silenced mental speech, internal dialogue, presumably. They repeatedly direct their attention to the actual nature of the mind, just as it appears. So, no, not mental contents, just the nature of the mind. Until physical and mental pliancy arise, this mental engagement is a facsimile of shamatha. But when they do arise, that is shamatha. So we all are familiar with that as being the sign of the attainment of shamatha, true physical and mental pliancy. Tsongkhapa later cites Ratnakara Shanti's vital point upon focusing on the very mind that illuminates various appearances. So the mind illuminates appearances, silence mental speech, and cultivates shamatha, and explains mental speech is the conceptualization that this is this. All labeling, kunto, presumably. Keeping in mind these crucial points from Jade Tsongkhapa, what follows is hard advice regarding these words from the lake-born Vajra found in phase 2 of the Vajra essence revealed by Dujam Lingpa. In a similar progression, first you arrest and subdue the thoughts aroused by your energy mind. Yes. Oh, Eric, you were unmuted. Are you contributing something or? Oh. In a similar progression, first you arrest and subdue the thoughts aroused by your energy mind. Then you relax and let thoughts manifest. So first you arrest and subdue thoughts, and then you relax and let them manifest. If one has been practicing shamatha diligently in retreat for some time, but finds the stability of attention has still not improved, this is likely because one has not yet fully settled the body and respiration in their natural states. That is, there is the essential step of training the inner voice of the mind to stop talking, stop commenting, stop taking the microphone, which has to happen before we are truly ready to relax and let thoughts manifest. Otherwise, the stories will keep overtaking us before we notice them. So relaxing that internal dialogue. So first, go back to settling the body in its natural state. That should start in Shavasana, the corpse position, whether that is a pose you like or not. Do it whether you like it or not. Just surrender, lie down, play dead, since it is so very helpful to start there, and because you will find it a crucial preparation for times of sickness and when dying. In that posture of total ease, it is then essential to establish 3 kinds of balance. So if you're sick or dying, you should do this posture, as well as for shamatha. Totally relax every muscle in the body without losing the mental clarity with which you began the sessions. Remain alert. Increase the stillness of the body and stability of the mind without losing that sense of ease and relaxation. So, presumably that means sort of maintaining or sustaining stillness and stability. He says without losing ease and relaxation, implying that second step requires an energetic application. And thirdly, gently enhance the vividness of awareness without losing the inner stability. So, relaxation, mindfulness is the second one, and the third one is clarity. Having thus settled the body, you are then ready to rest the body in its natural state, which means to stay there for longer and longer periods without letting the 3 imbalances diminish in quality, the 3 he just went through, but rather enabling them to deepen. This process takes such thorough attention that the mind will naturally become quite focused if you do it properly and fully, but you are not yet primarily concerned with the mind at this point. Eventually, you will need to reestablish this same sense of ease, stillness, and vigilance within a properly balanced, upright, seated posture. If you're having difficulties finding sustainable stillness in the body, in either supine or seated posture, see the section on Asanga as a method for mindfulness of breathing below. Then, for settling the speech in its natural state of effortless silence, there are two alternating steps corresponding to arrest and subdue. Once the body is settled, the first step is to arrest/block/prevent the arising of thoughts. As Yongchang Rinpoche states, if you wish to look into the mirror of the actual nature of your mind, do not look outward, rather, look inward. Likewise, even with the body, if you are looking at tactile sensations, they are outward. So simply arrest your awareness in the space in front of you and peripherally notice the tactile sensations in your body. Be sure to keep your eyes at least partially open. So as he describes all these different practices and steps that one should take, but it's a little fuzzy to me at least how long one needs to cultivate each step before moving on. As you sense the breath flowing in, arouse and focus awareness on what is already there and of which you are already aware. The unmediated experience of being aware of being aware. This itself nudges aside any thoughts that might intrude. It is like a large man filling a small telephone booth. No one else can get in. I love that image. Big fat guy getting into a booth. Just me. This prevents the arising of conceptualization. That's great. Fill your mind with awareness so thoughts have no room. Then subdue your thoughts as you exhale. That is when thoughts creep in very quickly. Deliberately release your awareness into the space in front of you. The thoughts will disperse into space and have no power to continue, just as though there were a strong wind from behind blowing away all the mosquitoes. On a windy day, the breeze is stronger than the mosquitoes, so they cannot land in it. Is that similar to our technique? Breathing out, letting go? Seems like a little bit. At this point, you're not interested in looking at the thoughts, and you're not telling them to stop. But according to another analogy, just as when you put your hand on your wallet, as a pickpocket reaches out to grab it, just by staring down the face of appearances, the thoughts cease automatically. You stare them down. What are you doing? Do you have the gall to arise as a thought? Thus, as you breathe in by inverting your awareness in upon the sheer luminosity and cognizance of consciousness, you prevent thoughts from arising. As you breathe out by releasing your awareness into the space in front of you, devoid of thoughts, you immediately subdue any thoughts that might arise so that they do not proliferate. By alternating these processes with each cycle of the breath, you are constantly reminding yourself how to practice at each moment. There isn't time to get carried away. Yet right here, you are not explicitly practicing mindfulness of breathing either, because the sensations or even the rhythm of the breath are not the primary object of meditation. What you are doing is following the above Pith instructions on each inhalation, exhalation, while resting in the awareness of awareness, in order to settle the inner speech of the mind in its natural state of effortless silence. That itself is a full-time job. Now relax, let thoughts manifest. A thought party, only when the internal commentator has been silenced. Only then can you allow thoughts to arise of their own accord and not be carried away by them. That's an interesting distinction. You can only do this without being carried away by thoughts, letting them come when you've suppressed or silenced the internal commentary. Then, because the respiration is actually settled in its natural, effortless rhythm, the inner sense of ease is sustained by the gentle flow of the prana. Prana. Dwelling in the spaciousness of resting your awareness in the space in front of you are ready to develop confidence in increasingly longer periods of steady mindfulness where thoughts will not disturb the stillness of awareness. Then you will actually have passed the threshold into single-pointed mindfulness, the first of the 4 kinds of mindfulness taught by Dujam Limpa, in which you are simultaneously aware of the stillness of awareness and the movements of thought. So the triad of stillness, movement, and awareness have collapsed into one at this experience, single-pointed mindfulness. Even at that point, you may have sessions in which you feel as though you have never meditated before. There will be times of drought and flood, presumably meaning times when there's a huge amount of thoughts and times where there's very few. This is unpredictable, for progress is not linear. Without hope that the meditation will turn out one way or fear that it will turn out another way, remain in the present moment and ask yourself, is this the way to achieve shamatha? If the answer is yes, then stop questioning and judging and simply let it happen. Be satisfied with that and continue with confidence. That is how you achieve shamatha, rather than just hope for it. We know that Mara still showed up even after the Buddha's enlightenment, but they always went away disappointed. Throughout his life, they kept trying to interfere with his teachings and so forth. You can develop such confidence while training along the path. You will see a clear emptying out of the sense of being the internal commentator, and later, with the second phase of mindfulness, manifest mindfulness, you will not even feel that you possess roaming thoughts. They occur but are not appropriated as your thoughts. They're somebody else's thoughts. Somebody else is thinking in my mind. Further along, even the sense of being a human being, with the past, present, and future, is emptied out as you overcome the tendency to appropriate and reify the movements of the mind. At that point, when you take the 4 empowerments in the context of Guru Yoga, the telephone booth of your body-mind is truly empty, and the Guru or Yidam can enter. More elegantly, you might say that you have cleared the shrine room and no one is sitting on the cushion. To offer a further analogy, appropriated thoughts are like pets that live indoors right where you are. You must constantly take care of them, clean up after their messes. While unappropriated thoughts are like the wildlife outside the retreat hut. They are not yours, but simply live in the vicinity. For the most part, the worst they can do is give you a mosquito bite. So for now, train your mind diligently in settling the inner voice of the mind in natural silence and the respiration in its natural rhythm, so that you can later make stable progress in taking the mind as the path, or any other shamatha practice. So remember, these are the origin of these are instructions to people on retreat at his center there in Cresto. So that might account for the sort of difficulty in piecing these together in a progressive way, step by step, that at least I'm experiencing. The Sangha's method for mindfulness of breathing. For some, so in 302, for some individuals, especially those with a constitution that is dominant in the elements of fire, burning, fiery, and air, spacey, discursive, practicing such a method for arresting and subduing thoughts, or even taking the mind as the path, arresting in the awareness can catalyze imbalances in the body system of the 5 vayus, and especially the prana vayu. So the difference between vayus and pranas is subtle. I think vayus are energies and pranas are winds, and the winds blow the energies but I'm not quite sure. This can manifest in a variety of ways, from general discomfort to physical shaking. So two sudden and sharp exhalations of the breath, or spontaneous jolts and twisting motions. Interesting description of sort of the clearing out process. We've had people off and on at our retreats go through these experiences, but not many, very infrequent. Much more frequent in the Kundalini tradition of like Muktananda, where they're intentionally trying to get the Kundalini to arise and clear out obscurations. Early on, I did retreat with Muktananda at his center, and the meditation was like being in a zoo. People were just like making the weirdest noises and moving all around, like flapping their arms and legs. It was quite a bizarre experience. This can happen especially if you focus primarily on the nature of space and awareness without remaining sufficiently grounded in the earth and water elements present in the body, stabilizing and water is adhesive, and without it having fully and sustainably settled the body and respiration in their natural states. Pranavaya, forward-moving air, or vital life force, is the fundamental energy in yoga and Ayurveda responsible for inward and upper movement, centered in the chest, heart, and head. It governs respiration, sensory perception, and our ability to absorb food, air, thoughts, and emotions. Thank you. Forward moving air, the vital life force, pranavaya. Such disturbances in the prana system, which may have their roots in trauma or other imbalances that were there before you began meditating, can often develop or be revealed only after you've been practicing retreat for some time. Moreover, these can emerge even when you have been properly following the instructions to rest your awareness in space and not to focus primarily on the tactile sensations correlated with the breath in order not to reify them. Settling the body and respiration in their natural states in particular is not always a linear process, and some problems may seem to be catalyzed by the very practices designed to settle body, speech, and mind in their natural states, sort of clearing out process. Initially, the proper response for an experienced meditator would be to treat such patterns of pranic movement as a meditative experience, or pranayama, temporary experience, in which case you would simply be aware of those movements without appropriating or reifying them. However, if such disturbing patterns of movements persist for weeks or months without releasing themselves, then a different approach is called for. Regarding the practices of resting the mind in its natural state, Laird Blimper writes, in The Vital Essence of Primordial Consciousness, excessive imprisoning constriction of the mind, loss of lucidity due to lassitude, and excessive relaxation resulting in involuntary vocalization and eye movement are faults. Thus, at a certain point, such involuntary movements of the body might, from one perspective, also need to be treated as a fault, and therefore something that does need a remedy, just as lassitude or excitation does. Instead of just considering it something that's part of the clearing out process of the meditation, stages of meditation, and just letting it take its course, one might also treat it as a problem or fault, and therefore something that does need a remedy. Insofar as such chronic imbalances do pose an obstacle to one's ability to progress more deeply into the stillness of shamatha, and therefore higher practices as well, one does need to find a way to retrain the system of prana and respiration so that it does not slip into vibrations or jolts as a default mode when resting in awareness. The foundational practice of mindfulness of breathing, whether taken purely as a shamatha practice or in the Vipassana mode of inquiry of the close application of mindfulness to the body, is precisely such a foundational practice that can tangibly heal the body-mind system. So it seems to be implying that that's the universal panacea for these experiences. Specifically, the close application of mindfulness to the body may be extremely helpful in such cases, which is sort of common these days in the meditation world. NBSR sort of made this famous, right? Body scans as the way of releasing erratic energy and dealing with chronic pain and things like that. This practice taught by the Buddha in the Mahasatipatthana Sutta guides you to examine the factors of arising and dissolution of whatever is experienced in the body. In this case, the various spasms and vibrations themselves. This close attention to sensations in a mode of inquiry is a quite different technique than that of viewing the body from the perspective of space and vast awareness as taught in the Dzogchen context. So, if you've ever read Tibetan presentations of the four mindfulnesses, foundations of mindfulness, such as there's one by Longchenpa in his book, in the compilation of translated texts by Tulku Tundrup called The Praxis of Dzogchen, originally called Buddha Mind. Longchenpa goes through the four foundations of mindfulness, and it's basically all of it is like mindfulness of the body as space, mindfulness of feelings as space, mindfulness of minds as space. Coming back, but it is a foundational practice and may help you to notice moment-to-moment aspects of the way your prana system is functioning that you would not be able to see without paying direct close attention to it in this way, as in the Buddha's discourse to Bahia, the famous one. In the tactilely sensed, let there be the tactilely sensed. So a little bit of a tongue twister. In what is felt, let there be just what is felt. There is much that can release. There is much that can release simply as a result of one's entering deeply into the experience of the many tactile sensations that arise with the subtle undulations of each breath cycle, no matter how varied the rhythm of the breathing may be. There is much that can be released. Anyway, just as many psychological problems can release themselves through the practice of taking the mind as the path, simply by noting the arising of mental afflictions, neuroses, and recollections of trauma without identifying with them or reifying them. So can many physical problems stemming from damage to the prana system be healed through such close, mindful awareness of tactile sensations, specifically those associated with the respiration. When offering a classic presentation of mindfulness of the inhalation and exhalation in his Shravaka Bhumi, Arya Sangha identifies precisely the types of problems that many practitioners encounter in our modern era. So from the Sangha's Shravaka Bhumi, there are two kinds of faults with respect to one's exertion in inhalation and exhalation: excessive slack engagement and excessive tight engagement. Due to excessively slack engagement, the lazy mind is either veiled with dullness and drowsiness, or else it is distracted outward. Excessively tight engagement inflicts harm on the body or on the mind. How is the body harmed? By forcefully inhaling and exhaling the breath, imbalanced energies enter the afflicted body, and right at the start, they pervade the major and minor limbs, so they are said to be pervasive. When those pervasive energies increase, these are said to be afflictive, and they produce illnesses in each of the major and minor limbs. That is called harmful to the body. So how is harm brought about in the mind? With too much force, the mind is overwhelmed by becoming distracted, depressed, or disturbed. In those ways, harm is done to the mind. Arya Sangha begins his presentation by teaching how to count the breaths in various ways. This is a practice that the Tibetan tradition has maintained, but usually only as a preliminary, often counting one or more sets of 7, 10, or 21 breaths at the beginning of a session to quiet the voice of the mind. The Sangha himself acknowledges that people with sharp faculties and clear minds take no pleasure in the practice of counting. Oh, that's boring. I don't need to do that. Simply by receiving instructions on counting, they very quickly comprehend it and are not attracted to it. As an alternative, he gives the core instruction for such individuals. By closely applying mindfulness to the object of inhalation, exhalation, they closely attend to and thus comprehend and recognize the location, duration, manner, and time of occurrence of the inhalations and exhalations. That is how they train. So, focusing on inhalation and exhalation, one attends to and comprehends and recognizes 3 different ways of engaging these aspects: location, duration, manner, and time. Time, like what time you breathe. Anyway, by devoting yourself to that practice and familiarizing yourself with it many times, physical pliancy, mental pliancy will arise, and upon reaching single pointedness, you will take delight in the object. Then, as commentary upon thorough training by way of the 16 aspects along the path of meditation, the 4th of the 5 paths of the Shravaka yana as taught by the Buddha, Sangha. So he's saying that on the 4th path of familiarization, there's training by way of 16 aspects, which is reminiscent of there's 2 mindfulness sutras that the Buddha taught. He taught the Satipatthana Sutra, which has the 4 domains for mindfulness of body, feelings, mind, and phenomena. And then he taught this thing of 16 steps in texts in sutras called Anapanasati suttas, where he taught 16 stages in dealing with the breath. That's largely interpreted as being specific instructions for entering into and progressing through the dhyana states. But it's unclear to me if these are the 16 that are being talked about here. Anyway, as commentary upon those 16 aspects, Sangha offers these crucial details for training by way of the first 5 of these 16. First, thus it is said, when the breath is mindfully inhaled, one practices by mindfully noting the inhalation. When the breath is mindfully exhaled, one practices by mindfully noting the exhalation. So these are quotes by Sangha, presumably of the Anapanasati Sutta. When focusing on the inhalation, exhalation, if a long inhalation occurs, one practices noting that a long breath is inhaled. If a long exhalation occurs, one practices noting a long breath is exhaled. Yeah, so these are, at least so far, the steps of those 16 in that sutta. When focusing on the interim, inhalation, exhalation, if a short breath is inhaled, one practices noting the short inhalation. If a short breath is exhaled, one practices noting the short exhalation. So in the text it says one notices a short inhalation and a short exhalation. I'm not sure about this phrase on the interim, inhalation, exhalation, which Alan Wallace interprets as being like if you do breathing practices deeply, often you'll need to take sort of intermediate breaths in between the deeper stages. That'll be more shallow. Let's see. one engages with inhalations, exhalations as being of long duration, while one engages with interim inhalations and exhalations as being of short duration. So one characterizes and recognizes them accordingly. That's a little confusing, but by interim inhalation, exhalation, the song may be referring to those shorter partial breaths that can often be experienced in between the longer cycle of a full breath, when it seems as though an extra bit of air needs to be inhaled or released. Nonetheless, since we certainly experience variations in the length of the main part of the breath, whatever that means, as well, one can understand this to mean that one maintains constant vigilance, sheshan, sampajanya, to notice the relative duration of each breath, and to notice when over time they may become shorter as the entire system is calmed and when needs less and less air. So as we calm down in meditation, the breathing actually becomes shorter and not as slow because we need less air. When one is in, I'm not sure about the slowness, but certainly less air. When one is intent upon and focuses on the passage of inhalation and exhalation through the minute cavities of the pores of the body. So in the sutta, the Buddha says something like, through the whole breath body, one breathes through the whole breath body. And so here we have an interpretation of that phrase, which has always eluded me. What is this breath body? It is usually the way it's translated. He's saying that's like breathing through the pores of the body. One authentically experiences the entire body. When a breath is inhaled, one practices by noting that I authentically experience the entire body, and the breath is inhaled. When one is authentically experiencing the entire body, and the breath is exhaled. One practices by noting that I authentically experience the entire body, and the breath is exhaled. At this stage, one is able to feel the entire body as a single whole, with a broad scope of awareness that encompasses the entire body and its stillness. The awareness is not moved in the slightest by following the sensations associated with inhalations or exhalations. Rather, one witnesses the subtle movements of prana throughout the body from the vantage point of a much more expansive stillness of awareness. Ideally, this has been the case all along, but at the earlier stages, the awareness may find itself moved more often by noticing various sensations, as well as rhythms and sub-rhythms within the breath, as it works through blockages in the prana system. 5. When the inhalation and interim inhalation have ceased, and there is an absence of inhalation and exhalation, one focuses on this occasion of the absence of inhalation and exhalation. When the inhalation, exhalation, and interim exhalation have ceased, and when the inhalation and interim inhalation have not yet occurred, there is an absence of exhalation and inhalation. When they are absent, one focuses on the occasion presented by their absence of the breath is inhaled. Upon having achieved pliancy but utterly refining bodily formations, one practices by noting that once having utterly refined bodily formations, the breath has been inhaled. A little bit of a clunky writing style this Sangha has. Sort of labored. This refers not to the cessation of breathing, but rather to the moment at the end of either the inhalation and exhalation, when air is neither moving inward nor outward. It can be a moment of sublime stillness and concentration. And as it naturally gets longer, there's more time to experience the healing of the bodily formations or the karmic energies that continuously shape the patterns and behavior of the physical body. So focusing on the gap between breaths, interestingly. There's more time to experience the healing of the bodily formations, the karmic energies that continuously shape the patterns and behavior of the physical body, lingering in these moments by the sheer stillness of attention and not by holding the breath, is what leads to the crucial factor of pliancy, which Sangha describes further. When, upon achieving pliancy by early refining bodily formations, the breath is exhaled, one practices by noting that once having utterly refined bodily formations, the breath has been exhaled. Moreover, as a result of completely devoting oneself to this practice, familiarizing oneself with it and practicing it many times, when one senses the harsh inhalations and exhalations that have not already been thoroughly purified, whatever discomforts occur are utterly refined. And when one senses the gentle, thoroughly purified inhalations and exhalations, different kinds of bliss arise. Just as in the practice of taking the mind as the path, resting in the stillness of awareness while discerningly observing the entire space of the mind and the movements that occur within that space, here one rests in the stillness of awareness and observes the movements correlated with the respiration throughout the entire tactile field of the body. Just as the former practice can be deeply healing for the mind, so may this practice prove to be deeply healing for imbalances occurring within the body, as attested by generations of accomplished yogis. Dudam Lingpa too seems to make reference to a practice of focusing intently upon the movements of vital energy or prana in order to tame them, as stated in his commentary to the Sharp Bhasha of Conscious Awareness Tantra, called his commentary is called whatever. First, since the conceptual mind is like a cripple that rides upon the vital energy, which is like a blind wild stallion, you should tether its mount with a stake of meditative experiences sustained by attention. We've heard that phrase before, like the mind is a cripple because it has no power to move, and the body is like a wild energy source because it has no wisdom. So you need to tether them together with the stake, the purba of meditation and sustained attention. For those dealing with problems of excessively intense or active vital energies, it is especially important, as mentioned above in the lead-up, for dispelling the 5 obscurations, to keep in mind that Asanga statement that the movement of inhalation is downward and the movement of exhalation is upward. It seems pretty obvious, but he makes a big point of emphasizing that. Even while one can feel and potentially be aware of many upward movements of energies in the body during the inhalation, at a certain point, it is essential to actively pay attention to the downward movement of air and its associated energies when inhaling. Then one may observe the air moving upward through the nose and mouth while exhaling, upward through the nose and mouth while exhaling, releasing the air and with it thoughts into space. This helps to calm and ground the many energies moving in the body, especially when catalyzed by systemic reactions to environment, emotional upheavals, illnesses, and so on. One can experiment with deliberately watching the flow of energy correlated with the inhaled air as it moves downward like a wave of water washing through the interior of the body, and then watching the reverse flow as the energy correlated with the breath gently rises and releases in the exhalation. This preliminary stage might be seen more as a method for settling the body in its natural state than a shamatha method per se, because the attention must actually move too much at the beginning in following those many patterns of change for it to stabilize in the stillness needed for a proper shamatha method. Even for an experienced meditator, however, when there are upheavals in the body, sometimes it is simply not possible to find sustainable stillness of awareness until one has ridden the waves of the downward and upward movements of the flow of the respiration for many hours over the course of days or weeks. Interesting description of the process of settling. Nevertheless, settling the energies by actively watching the downward and upward movements associated with the respiration prepares one for the occasion when one knows one is ready to let the awareness expand once again to encompass the whole body. Then the awareness again remains perfectly still while observing the sensations throughout the body in a single gestalt, as it were. Once again, nevertheless, the same paragraph, nevertheless, settling the energies by actually watching downward and upward movements associated with respiration prepares one for when one knows one is ready to let the awareness expand again to encompass the whole body. Awareness again remains perfectly still while observing the sensations throughout the body in a single gestalt when it enters upon a true form of mindfulness of breathing as a method of shamatha. It's especially important in this method to fully unite the non-conceptual mental awareness with the equally non-conceptual flow of tactile sensations, thus leaving no room for conceptualization to incur. One so completely fills the non-conceptual flow of awareness with a continuous rhythm and experience of the tactile sensations arising in the body that thoughts and images disperse of themselves. This then is another classical method for settling the speech of the mind in its natural state of effortless silence. So another method. Interesting use of tactile sensations. With discerning intelligence, one lays the non-conceptual flow of mindfulness imbued with introspection, stability, clarity, and vividness. Presumably, the last two are sort of similar, same, like a blanket upon the bed of the ebb and flow of tactile sensations corresponding to the rhythm of the respiration throughout the entire body, so that there's no space, so to speak, between the mindfulness and its non-conceptual object, like the horse whisper taming the blind wild stallion of the prana. You gently and thoroughly calm all the wandering thoughts of the restless mind, so that a flow of deep, silent rest becomes the new default mode for the body and mind. Once you have established that flow, you can notice areas of the body where energy starts to intensify, and then you can experiment to see if this soft, gentle breath can soothe that energy before it becomes explosive. Your mindfulness of the sensations is so vigilant that you might even notice when there is going to be a disturbance of the flow of prana before it happens. Your sheer attention will not necessarily stop an involuntary movement from occurring, but as you become more sensitized to when it is about to happen, you can then deliberately relax at the root of the movement, and it may indeed release more gently. At the root, relax at the root of the movement. As you allow this complete engagement of mindfulness to descend upon the imageless appearances, tactile sensations, you may also begin to gain insight into the lack of inherent nature of the body as a body. That is, you begin to notice that the visual images by which you usually identify my body are not present in the tactile sensations. Nor are the tactile sensations present in the conceptualized images that are based on bits of various sensory data habitually pieced together to be called my body. The tactile sensations are not included. Thus, you may take your raw experience of non-conceptual tactile sensations in which no body is to be found anywhere as an opportunity to recall the view that the body is a mere conceptual designation, empty of inherent existence. Furthermore, you will recognize that tactile sensations themselves are not even physical. They're simply appearances arising in a space of awareness. So they're not even physical tactile sensations. They're just perceptions, appearances. There's nothing physical there in the direct non-conceptual experience of the basis of designation for what you call a body. There's nothing physical there in the basis of designation for what we call a body. Thus, focusing single-pointedly on the experience of prana can lead you to realize the nature of the body as being empty like space. Likewise, focusing single-pointedly on tactile sensations in the objective field, you do not get caught up in the subjective experience of feelings, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, that may be associated with those tactile appearances. Thus, you release the mental story associated with whatever is happening in the body. As conceptualization naturally diminishes, this allows the flow of prana upon which the conceptual mind rides, likewise to soften and become subtler, which in turn soothes and heals the disturbing patterns of mind that may have been arising. Once the energetic system is deeply calmed, you may then, if you wish, continue with the Dzogchen approach to mindfulness of breathing, practicing the oscillation between empty space and awareness as described above in a lamp for dispelling the 5 obscurations. That was empty space on the exhalation and empty awareness on the inhalation. Thus, even if one does not follow a Sangha's classical method of mindfulness of breathing all the way to its culmination of shamatha, which one may indeed choose to do, it can be a crucial preliminary method to completely calm the prana of your breathing until it settles in its own place, in preparation for taking the mind as the path or another shamatha method. After all, this is what Jade Tsongkhapa himself set forth as the final attribute of the 8-point posture by which one should properly begin any other form of shamatha meditation. So whether one wishes to practice shamatha with a sign, such as focusing on a visualized image, a Dzogchen approach to mindfulness of breathing, taking the mind as the path, or shamatha without a sign, culminating in the realization of the empty, actual nature of the mind through vipassana, settling the respiration in its natural state is an indispensable preparation. It is a practice to which one may return again and again as a source of healing for various upheavals of the body and mind, especially while engaged in a long-term retreat designed to actively achieve shamatha and reach the proverbial path. Any comments, questions, thoughts? We have another, let's see, 16 some odd pages to finish the book, which would leave us time to either skip a week or have a class on the Samdhinir Mochana Sutra, which would be fun. Shall we continue ahead on his third presentation, Taking Consciousness as the Path, the synthesis of Pith Instructions from our lineage gurus. I don't know if people read this far beforehand, but you okay going for it? Or do you want to go and try to talk through what he presented? Any comments on that? Like, it seems to me like it's a little bit of a patchwork. And it's, I have this notion of him like sending these long, apparently he communicates to his retreatants primarily by email. And doesn't like to do in-person meetings while they're in retreat. But mostly by email. And he has them ask questions, and he responds in length by email. And I'm imagining, they mentioned this somewhere of him, this being from like instructions given to retreats, and I'm imagining him, he and Ava sort of piecing together these instructions. Plus she apparently does the same. She's also the retreat guide at their center in Crestone. And them sort of coming up with these versions as in an attempt to create a progression of the practices, but it doesn't feel like a clean progression. It's like feels like we get to the culmination and then we go and we look at a different way. In particular, the second one, where there's a very long section on, well, how does the Sangha present that? But
It
any
seems
other?
to spiral.
Yeah, spiral's good, like going deeper as it sort of builds, um, sort of filling in more detail or depth or something each time. Well, why don't we go forge ahead? 313, taking consciousness as the path. And so he distinguishes this from taking the mind as the path. What's the difference between mind and consciousness? Bye, chip in, take care. Difference between mind and consciousness. A mind includes four skandhas: feeling, perception or discrimination, formation, and consciousness. And consciousness, so it's just one part of mind. Does that sound right? No? Yes? So taking consciousness as the path instead of mind, presumably meaning just sort of awareness instead of like any sense of content of awareness of the formations and feelings and perceptions and so forth. Perhaps meaning turning, inverting awareness on itself, looking at consciousness. Wrong.
Is that where the non-dual aspect resides in consciousness?
Um, Normal consciousness is totally dualistic,
Right.
but in the mind-only traditional upward, there's sort of no external, so it has a somewhat a sense of non-dual experience. And certainly, when consciousness is purified into a wisdom, then it's completely non-dual.
So, and that the technique of looking inward is a way to broach that.
Yes, yeah, to make it non-dual. I see what you're saying. Yes, thank you. Okay, a synthesis of Pith Instructions for my lineage gurus. So it starts with a few quotes of the 10 kasinas. So kasinas are bases of the elements. Um, they're objects of meditation in the Theravadan so-called system, the early system of the Buddhists, of the suttas of the five Nikayas. And they're little discs. They would use little discs of colors, shapes, um, or substance. Like there's the 10 kasinas are generally I think there's 4 or 5 colors, and then there's 4 or 5 elements. And the last couple are light and consciousness, are make up the 10. So one would make these little discs and focus on them as an external support, and then that external image would become sort of a mental image and become internalized. And through that one would then progress through the stages of access meditation, which is the preliminary concentration for dhyana, and then full dhyana concentration. So this is from the Buddha in a sutta called the Kosala Sutta in the Anguttara Nikaya, one of the 5 Nikayas, the so-called numbered. Of the 10 kasinas bases, this is the foremost, namely when one perceives the consciousness kasina. So there's consciousness, there's light, there's space. So consciousness would be, it's not an element and it's not a color. Interesting. So they're not, so what are they? They're elements and not colors. I don't know. The elements have certain colors, but they're the elements and then something else. Anyway, the consciousness kasina, the quintessence of consciousness, above, below, across, undivided, and measureless. So one begins with a sort of crude object, in this case consciousness, and then as one progresses in meditating on it, concentrating on it, it becomes a perfect version of that element. Such as with earth, initially it would be like it would have blemishes and differences, just as any segment of earth we might come up with, and then one would come up with like a purified, like a pure form, like in Plato's world version of earth. So here we have it for consciousness. There are beings who are percipient in such a way that they're able to practice with the consciousness kasina and perfect it to become undivided and measureless. But even for beings who are percipient in such a way, there's alteration, there's change in their experience. Seeing this thus, bhikkhus, the instructed noble disciple becomes disenchanted with it. Being disenchanted, he becomes dispassionate toward the foremost, not to speak of what is inferior. So this is an indication by the Buddha that one should not become attached to the object of dhyana, of concentration states, or the experience of the dhyanas. Another quote from the Asta Sahasrika Prajnaparamita Sutra. In this way, the mind is not the mind, the nature of the mind is clear light. So we saw this earlier and talked about it. Thirdly, examine the character of unborn awareness, one of the early slogans in the system of 59 slogans and 7 points. Page 314. All of us space travelers, which is dakinis really, are directly or indirectly taking consciousness as our path to shamatha and beyond, to the identification, and beyond to the, i.e., to the identification of pristine awareness. So, really, that's our object, is concentration in phase 1 of the Vajra essence. That's the commentary by Dujam Lumpa on the short Vajra of Awareness Tantra. The lake-born Vajra teaches the practice of taking the impure mind as the path, as the entryway to the Dzogchen path of cutting through to pristine awareness. This is directly parallel to the practice of taking the aspect of the mind as the path, as taught in the Sharp Vajra of Conscious Awareness Tantra and its commentary excerpted earlier in this volume. I'm not sure even why he mentions that, because it's like Dujam Lingpa, in his commentary of the Vajra Essence, is commenting on the Sharp Vajra of Conscious Awareness Tantra, and in his commentary to the first practice of taking the aspect of the mind of the path, he calls it, or glosses it, as taking the impure mind as the path. The lake-born Vajra, so in that terma by Dujam Lingpa called the Vajra Essence, manifestation of Padmasambhava appears, called the lake-born Vajra, and gives a commentary on the Sharp Vajra of Awareness Tantra, which is was also a terma that he discovered. The lake-born Vajra describes the culmination of this particular practice for achieving shamatha. So this first stage is directed at achieving shamatha using the mind as the path. O Vajra of mind. And so that's the name of Dujam Lingpa in that sort of visionary experience, which he records as the Vajra essence. He's having a conversation with the lake-born Vajra. So the lake-born Vajra is talking to him. O Vajra of mind, the bonds of mindfulness and firmly maintained attention are gradually dissolved by the power of meditative experiences until finally, because the ordinary mind of an ordinary sentient being, as it were, disappears, thoughts go dormant, and roving concepts subside into the space of awareness. You then slip into the blank vacuity of the substrate, in which self, others, and objects disappear. So this experience that he talked about before, of at a certain phase of shamatha, one experiences this collapse of sensory experience. The senses just sort of dissolve, and there's this vacuity experience. where there's no object and no subject. There's no like perception going on. That state then, the state that becomes manifest, in which the appearance of self, others, and objects have vanished, and in which there is an inwardly focused grasping to the experiences of vacuity and luminosity, is the substrate consciousness. So the normal dualistic appearances collapse into the substrate consciousness, and there's this vacuity experience, sort of a non-dual experience. This description corresponds closely with many other classical descriptions of the achievement of shamatha in the Buddhist tradition, wherein the five physical senses no longer perceive their objects, and the mind is completely focused within a domain of subtle mental consciousnesses. And he's referring, I think, to descriptions of the achievement of dhyana in the so-called Theravadan tradition, where they describe this phase of access concentration going into full dhyana, and that there's this sort of collapse of the object of meditation sort of disappears. As Jade Tsongkhapa writes in his concise presentation of the stages of the path to enlightenment, the shorter one, the small one, finally, when you settle in meditative equipoise, only the aspects of sheer cognizance, luminosity, and bliss of the mind appear. Bliss, luminosity, and non-thought, without the appearance of the signs of visual forms, sound, and so on. In the context of Dzogchen, this subtle dimension of brilliantly lucid, non-conceptual consciousness is simply called the substrate consciousness, but not in the philosophically refined sense typically associated with the Chittamatra school. There is consensus then from the Pali Canon through Sangha Bhumi, Kamalashila, Tsongkhapa, and many other authoritative sources within the Indian and Tibetan Buddhist tradition, that the achievement of shamatha as the necessary basis for fully realizing the fruits of vipassana involves a withdrawal and implosion of the five physical senses. In the Dzogchen and Mahamudra traditions, however, if one continues to meditate diligently, one will pass beyond this phase of an inwardly focused grasping to the experiences of acuity and luminosity, to a phase where the creative power of consciousness that manifests as outer appearances is once again unimpeded, but in a transformed way, so that one may remain in flawless shamatha with the senses clear. So that's sort of like an appearance of sacred world, seemingly. Interesting presentation. Shall we pause there, call it a night? Because after that it sort of launches off into something. Thoughts, comments, suggestions, questions? Well, I'll circulate the Samdhina Mochana. See if we can make it through part of that next session as well as this. The choices are like finishing up this section, and then like going back and going again through all three by Alan, trying to make some sort of piece them together. It's one possibility. Or checking out the Samdhina Mochana. If you have any preferences, let me know. By this merit, may all attain omniscience, may defeat the enemy wrongdoing, from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great east, may the lotus garden of the Rigden's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening and week. Take care.